Okay. Hello, Taryn.
Hello, Naomi. It's good to see you.
Could you start off just by introducing yourself, tell people who you are, what you want them to know about you?
Sure. My name is Taryn O'Neill. I am a storyteller. I'm a science nerd. I started off in Hollywood on the business side, and then I was an actress and a writer. And I became a big science advocate, starting a science advocacy creative group. And then I found my way into directing and filmmaking, constantly thinking about what the future of the world is going to look like. I love science fiction and kind of fell into this idea of considering what the future of story looks like. So I'm happy to be here.
Can you describe for us your experience during the Avalon Future of Story Fellows Week?
On this dimension, this dimension,
On any dimension.
this plane of existence. Um, it was one of those twofold experiences that really put me out of my comfort zone, but that was something that I really I wanted to be put out of. Going into a place I'd never been to in nature amongst women that I had never spent any time with, that I didn't know. And it was this really incredible sort of cerebral and creative journey where every day had new lessons, new growth, new challenges. It felt like a day, it felt like a year. Time definitely sort of stood still, especially during some of the sort of poignant learning experiences. I think it was helpful that I didn't have any preconceived notions going in. I just loved the core of the idea of the question: how do we make a more beautiful future? What is the bridge to a more beautiful future through story? And it's just the idea of story and the future of story, sort of as a blueprint to society to help us sort of transition into this sort of exponentially changing world, has something that's been sort of gnawing at me for over a year now. And so this sort of came at that perfect time where I was sort of taking theory into practice of like, how do I apply these thoughts on the future of story into my real world projects? And I kind of didn't know how to do that. And I think that this fellowship, this week of experiences with these other creatives sort of gave me a tool set to start bringing those ideas and bringing them into the real world. So that's, it doesn't give you specifics, but that's really sort of what it gave me. And it really connected my head, heart, and instinct, my gut, which I really felt had been disconnected. I didn't realize we're disconnected, but then I realized, especially after I left, that wow, they really were disconnected. And so it was such a beautiful experience to marry the physical, emotional work we did with kind of the creative, intellectual work that we did as well, because it kind of created this conduit.
That's amazing. So cool. What were your key insights or biggest takeaways that have stayed with you in the intervening months?
That the biggest takeaways is about community and tribe, and that the sum is bigger than the parts of the whole. How do you say that again? The sum
Greater than the parts.
something like
Yeah.
that. But I've always been a lone wolf, and one of the exercises really helped me to acknowledge sort of that story, that narrative that I've let permeate my life, and sort of turn it on its head and be like, well, you can be a lone wolf in some of your endeavors, but the work that you want to do, it's at a community level, it's at a networked level. And so that week really sort of, I took away from it just that different perspective of where I've come from and where I'm going, and sort of what I need to change around me to help me sort of with my grander goals. And I really do think insight wise of being given permission to dream those big impossible dreams, that those crazy ideas that you have, there are other people out there with big crazy ideas that just want to know that they're not alone. So again, that's the lone wolf idea of like, no, let's all howl together, and then it becomes a choir and we can actually make our voices amplified. So that was something, it gave me a lot of courage and bravery to be like, no, this is, you know, I did an event that I never would have done of, that I never would have created. I conceived of and then produced in literally 6 weeks time if it hadn't been for our fellowship and sort of having been given faith in my ideas and my actions.
Can you talk a little bit about that event and also any other ways that you feel like your work has shifted coming out of it?
Yes. So the event that I did was called Flipping the Script on Climate. And it was this, I have a background, as I talked about, in science and storytelling. But prior to the fellowship, I had started really shifting my projects as a writer into more of the climate space, because I believe that there aren't sort of positive stories that have climate elements in it that sort of look to a better future. I saw that all these sort of climate influenced stories were apocalyptic or gloom and doom. And so I was thinking, anytime anybody hears the word climate, they're going to think of like a negative future. And yes, you know, the science is there that we have to take action on climate, but we don't know what that action is towards. We can't see what that better future is like unless somebody paints a picture for it. And there happens to be this incredible department at the Arizona State University called the Center for Science and the Imagination. And they've published since 2014 climate anthologies that all have a positive spin. They basically integrate real world science and technology to the betterment of the planet. And so they paint a picture of 40 years, 60 years in the future. And I figured, I'm like, nobody knows about these stories. And they've been they're very seminal to sort of my work as a writer, as a sci-fi writer. And I'm like, what if actors, oh, I lost my, sorry, I lost my earpod. This should be okay. I'm so enthused by actors. What if actors, let's go back. So this climate fiction work has been very seminal to my writings as a sci-fi script writer. And I thought, what if actors, like notable actors, read excerpts from these short stories that are so inspiring, that paint a picture, you know, of a better world, and we can get their fan base, and it can be a virtual event online, and then we can get some climate scientists to talk about it afterwards and talk about the validity of the science, and then maybe a social scientist talking about like, how do we change public perception, and maybe a filmmaker or something. And it was an idea I threw out to my Sirens partner, and she totally ran with it. And within 6 weeks, we had a fully formed, produced event. But, you know, to get it going, we basically had to like throw spaghetti against a wall, basically. And I reached out cold to the head of the center at Arizona State University. And I was like, hey, this is what I want to do. Kind of made it sound like it was a little bit more ahead than it actually was, which you have to do.
Only way anything happens.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. And they bit, and they thought that everybody that we reached out to get help with, whether it was a climate scientist or an actor or an author, to get their permission to use their, you know, excerpts from their work, were so over the moon about this idea. And it was just so beautiful, where it's like when it came from an authentic place. This just made sense to me and to Tamara. We just were like, you know, we were trying to harness awareness for the climate summit that was happening in Glasgow, COP26, and some parallel climate events that were going on, you know, and it was just like the time was right. And so we really just pushed for it, and it came together absolutely beautifully. And thankfully, one of our fellows, Sydney Hugh, she stepped up and helped us on the production technical side and was very gracious about everything. And yeah, it turned out so well. I mean, obviously there was a lot of challenges and hiccups, like producing it at such sort of a rapid rate, but you know, we hit end on the live stream and it was done, and people were moved, and authors responded to us and were like, we are digging up the story again, and we want to like explore it and like write more about the story and these characters because of how we saw the actors perform it. And Arizona State University, the center wants to work with us again and like have us involved in some story research. And, you know, we want to do another event like this, but have it live. And it just sort of all came together in a very unique way that I think our time together sort of cultivated. There was just this cross-sectionality of all these, it was such a big macro vision of how story fits into the world, into our own lives. I think that was something that was incredibly powerful during our time there. You know, it wasn't just us all at a screenwriting camp, you know, like on final draft, writing a bunch of scripts for, you know, 7 hours a day. Like we were doing deep work. And some of that deep work it's going to manifest in different ways. So I'm really grateful
Oh,
to
cool.
it.
Beautiful. Can you share a little bit about how you're thinking about the future of story?
I feel hopeful. I feel that just because of the people that I've met over the past 6 months, people are talking about this. People are talking about the importance, the significance of story when it comes to change, when it comes to painting a picture, you know, drawing a roadmap to our future. We have to see it. Like we have to see it and we have to feel it to be able to make it come true. And if science has proved anything when it comes to stories, it's that it impacts our brain and is a Trojan horse in there, and that it affects us subconsciously far more than consciously. And so I think that the containers of story, the people that control the story, control the world. I think that you said that in your TED Talk. And it's really true. I believe it. And there's research to prove that. So, and I think that the people who are out there looking to use story for good are getting stronger. And my goal is not just on my own individual pursuits, but as sort of a connector between people doing this sort of work, because there can't be scarcity or competition when it comes to this work at all. And it was so interesting when I was doing some of the, you know, attempting to do some marketing and publicity for the event, and some of those sort of foundations that, oh no, it's not something that we've officially put on, so we can't support it. And you're like, we're both aligned with our same missions, shouldn't we? And it just didn't make sense to me with what we're actually trying to do here, which is save the world. I mean,
Yeah. I often think that when change organizations get overly institutionalized, they stop. It becomes their business to stay in business more than it becomes the work of action, the work that they were started to do. Like there comes a tipping point where I think they sort of drift into existing to exist.
yeah, I saw that. It was a fear-based thing. It's like, we have to vet you and we have
Right.
this and that. And there's these higher ups of this board and this money and this is, and I'm just like, wow, you realize how it is the community level, the grassroots level that gets work done.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else you want to say or you want people to know about this work?
No, just that I'm really grateful to be going through it and doing the work, and not being attached to what the outcome of that work is, which I think can be really hard for me personally, and I know for a lot of us.
Yeah.
But you know, and trusting that sort of the work will be fruitful and abundant in a way too, and stopping myself from sort of getting into that desperation mode.
Yeah.
But yeah, just very, very grateful for the time we had together and from the lessons learned.
How can people find your work?
You can find my work at my link tree, which you can probably find via my Twitter. So my name is across the socials, Taryn O'Neill, TarynOneil on Instagram, Twitter, and not TikTok. I'm not on TikTok yet. But I've heard there's some good stuff on there. And you know, you can IMDb me too, and and find my acting stuff there.
Wonderful. Thanks for chatting today.
Thank you for having me, Naomi.